And now when we are hitting the real time, it also works. Just a quick introduction for you. As I said, Vitor is from Portugal. What? And he works as a development officer in ITF, and especially for Europe, I think, Vitor. So he has been, the traveling guy working to help associations like Norwegian Tennis Federation to make sure that we also grow and develop. That is really his job, and gives us clues, tips, and make sure that the quality within the products that ITF want us to take on board is taken care of. So thank you, Vitor, for taking your time for sharing some information with Norwegian Tennis. So I hand you the microphone now, and I'm going to turn off mine. So Vitor, welcome to Norway digitally.
Yes, so thank you very much for having me. Unfortunately, it's not in person, but this is the reality of our times. I'm going to share my screen so you can see my presentation. Hopefully you can see it, yes?
Everything is perfect.
Okay, so welcome everyone. I hope that this information that I have here is interesting for you. I will give you an overview of what is development, what is the development strategy of the ITF, especially for Europe, which is my direct responsibility, as Aslak mentioned. So talking a little bit very fast about tennis. So tennis is a very special sport in many things. A lot of players. It's one of the best sports in terms of gender equality. It's also a sport that people play for all ages, so not just it's not just competition for the top level players, but actually there is competition in many different ages, including for senior players. There is a lot of competition. Also for disability, we have a competitive structure, as you know, in wheelchair tennis for disabled players. So this makes tennis a very special sport. Something that is also special is the structure of the governing bodies that we have in tennis. Not just like, for instance, in football, you have an international federation, FIFA. In tennis, you also have the ITF, but you have other governing bodies like the ATP, the WTA, and also the Grand Slams. So all these four governing bodies actually they manage different parts of the sport. It's important to note that of these four governing bodies, only two of them actually invest in development, in what we call development. ITF for sure, that invests around $11 million per year on development, and this is the use of this budget, let's say, that me as a development officer is responsible for. But also the Grand Slams. The Grand Slams actually give $2 million for development. These $2 million are actually given to the ITF for the ITF to manage. So they add to the global development budget that we have to actually help the nation. So the idea is to use all this budget, and as you will see, we distribute this budget throughout many programs and to many types of activities. Just to say also that I think it's important, the Grand Slam budget is directed mainly to player development, and as you will see, the ITF also invests in other aspects of the sport. It's important to know that tennis is a very charismatic sport, as we all know, but it's one of the three sports that have more than 1 billion followers. So this is something that a statistic that we get not just from the number of spectators that actually watch the main competitive event, but also in social media and other platforms that is compiled to give you a global idea of the number of people that are actually following the sport. To go more deeply into the development strategy and focusing mainly on Europe, of course, we have 6 regions in the world, and we have development officers for all those regions. So we have 10 development officers in total that are the people that directly go and contact physically with the nations. Of course, this is a different situation post-COVID, that most of the contact that we have is actually online. But as you will see, normally we have this contact directly with the nations. We actually structure the nations in terms of priority. We calculate this priority, this eligibility criteria, looking at the development that the nations have in terms of production of players. So if the players play on Grand Slams, if the players, what's the position of their Davis Cup and Billie Jean King Cup teams. And we also combine this statistics with financial statistics that is given us by the World Finances Organization. So we get an idea of how developed is the country, and we separate the countries in different groups. So 4 groups. We have the Tier 4 nations, which are the strongest nations. You can see in that map the nations that are actually, of course, the 2 Grand Slam nations, but also nations like Spain, Italy, and Germany are Tier 4 nations. So they have a lot of financial capability, but also they are very developed in terms of their the level of their players. Then we have Tier 3 nations, Tier 2 nations that are the group where Norway is included, and also my country, Portugal, is included in the Tier 2 nations. And of course the Tier 1 nations, which are the less developed nations like Albania, like Moldova, like Turkey. Those are nations that actually need the more pressing help from the ITF. Also, the ITF tries to manage this budget that I talked, so the combined budget of the ITF and of the Grand Slam Development Fund. We manage part of this money, the biggest part of this money directly, but we also give some development money to the regional associations, in this case to Tennis Europe. So more or less $1.5 million go to Tennis Europe. So that Tennis Europe can actually manage their own development program. So there is always a connection between the ITF. So part of my job is to supervise actually the application that Tennis Europe makes of those programs. We will talk about some of them briefly. But it's good to understand that all the money, all the development money that Tennis Europe has and that applies with the nations comes from this big budget from the ITF and the Grand Slam Development Fund. So as part of our strategy, we have 5 development pillars. So the facilities, education, participation, performance, and events, and we have several programs in each of them. For the facilities, we have the Facility Grant Program, which is a program that provides a grant that can go up to $50,000. It's not much for a facility, but of course the idea is to have some seed money to help the nations to build new facilities or to refurbish existing facilities. Can be national training centers, but can also be independent clubs that have some connection with the national association. We also have the recognition, the National Training Center Recognition Program, and you can see the applications that we have, that we are currently working on. So all these countries, we are in the process of evaluating their national training centers, and of course, in normal times we would do visits. So most of these countries I have already visited, so I have a good idea of the characteristics of their national training centers. So this is all information that we have and that we use to create these recognition programs. I can tell you that just today the United Kingdom has had its national training center recognized in gold level. Previously, France already had, earlier this year, was also recognized with a gold level, and hopefully we will have some other countries coming up in the future. Actually, Norway is one of the countries that we are expecting to have an application in the next years. In the education side, we also have a recognition, in this case, of the coaches' education system, so the education system. We actually don't call it in the ITF anymore coaches' education, and we just call it education because actually we are including more and more, not just coaches, but also physical education teachers, managers, parents, and even players. So we have, as you will see, a lot of content for all of these different stakeholders in the sport. So you can see in Europe, Europe is actually the region. It's the most advanced region in many aspects, in player development for sure, but also in the coaches' education systems. We have the largest numbers of recognized countries actually in Europe, and as you can see, Norway is one of our gold level countries. These are the countries that we are currently working on. The countries that are in green are the countries that were more recently recognized. We should include also Estonia, that was recognized just 1 week ago with a silver level. So we are constantly working on these countries, not just to bring in new countries and to recognize new systems, but also to make upgrades, so a country can start in the bronze level and then can make the upgrade in a few years to the silver level or eventually to the gold level. That's the idea. One of the things that we developed the most during these 2 pandemic years, so as you all know, with the pandemic, with COVID-19, one of the situations that we had all over the world was actually to go more into the online systems and everything that we have available in terms of using the internet as a vehicle to provide content. The ITF did exactly the same, and we developed more and more the platform that we already had, which was the ITF Online Academy. As you can see, also Europe here is the leading region. We have a lot of content. Actually, it's quite amazing how much we have grown in these past 2 years. In many languages, so English, French, and Spanish are the main language, but we also have in Portuguese, in Russian, in Arabic, many other languages are coming up. We are currently making the translation in Turkish, in Georgian, in Lithuanian, so any country can approach the ITF and actually request that we do these translations, and actually what we need is the help of the nations in this. So hopefully Norway will come to us and start working on this also, so we can provide also content in Norwegian. Just to give you an idea of the countries that have more users in the online academy, this is the top 10. So normally the United Kingdom and Spain are struggling for the first place and changing places every single month. But we have a lot of countries that are adding constantly new users to the platform. Just to say that this platform is very important, not only to provide, of course, content. We have actually 2 structures in the ITF Online Academy. One structure that deals with courses and has a lot of short courses, but also the first part of all the ITF coaches education courses, so the courses that give level 1, 2, and 3 in the ITF system. They also have the first part that is online, so a lot of the content of the courses is online, and we provide this through this platform. But we also have a part of the ITF Academy that we call the library, that some of you may know as the iCoach. So a few years back, this was the iCoach content, which is the content that we have with presentations from many conferences that we organize throughout the years, but also interviews and other content that our experts produce constantly. So we have a large quantity of video and presentations that are available to the users of the platforms. The registration in this platform is completely free, but not all of the content is free. Most of the content is actually free, so I would say that 70% of the content that you have on the platform is completely free, but then you have some premium content like the content that we have in this library that can be accessed with a small fee. A lot of nations actually provide this service to their coaches because they make a subscription, so they pay a small fee to the ITF, and as a trade-off in that fee, they get an administration capability on the platform, so they have the possibility of checking all the users and what all the users in their country are actually doing in the academy. So this gives them the tracking ability to see what every single coach in the platform is doing, but also gives them the possibility to organize their own courses in the platform. So this is a big help for most of the nations. As you know, creating an online platform for education is something that can be tremendously expensive, and the ITF is providing this to the nations free of charge if you just want to use the platform as provider of content. But if you want actually to go to the next level, you just pay a small fee to the ITF, and the ITF provide you with this administration capability, and we actually can merge your own coaches education system with the ITF Academy and actually provide all your courses, in even the conferences, workshops, whatever you organize, you can use and provide to your coaches through the academy. And as I said, you can also translate the content to your own native language. Just as an interesting situation, so I have, of course, administration privileges for the region of Europe, so I can track every single user in Europe and see what they are doing. And I can tell you that, for instance, Norway at this moment has 52 coaches that are directly using the academy. To give you an example and a comparison with other countries, I can look at the Republic of North Macedonia, which is a smaller country in the Balkans with 2 million people, and they have twice the number of coaches that you have. So they have a lot more coaches engaged in the academy. So this is one of we are always doing these kind of comparisons, looking at the countries, seeing what the countries are doing. Actually, North Macedonia is one of the countries that has, it's one of our priority countries, so it's a tier 1 nation, but has a lot of good high-level juniors that actually are coming up in the Tennis Europe rankings and in the ITF rankings. So it's quite interesting to see how an underdeveloped nation can actually progress so much and produce so much new young players. So we always try to correlate this with the number of coaches that are engaged in the country and the characteristics of those coaches, and we try to engage the coaches as much as possible. So this is something that I think it's important for you to be aware. Anyhow, my advice would be for every single one of you, if you didn't do it yet, you just need your email, and please go to the ITF Online Academy. You just make a Google search. You don't even need a link. It's quite easy to find it, and just register and just browse through the content because it's quite interesting. We also have international tutors that help us provide the different courses that we provide to the nations. We use, as you will see, some ITF funding for this, but also some Olympic solidarity funding. So a different source for funding. So we have that budget that comes from the ITF, 11 million US dollars. Then you have the budget from the Grand Slam Development Fund, which is more or less 2 million US dollars. But we also have the possibility of accessing the money from the Olympic Committee. So you have your National Olympic Committee. We also can apply to different programs and actually get some extra funding there. So we try to give these tutors. You can see that the tutors can come from any single country in Europe. And actually, we use these tutors to provide the content and to work with us in the different courses. Of course, the development officer can also be and is one of the tutors, as you can see in that photo with me. We can also provide this service, let's say, to the nation, but we try to engage the coaches from the nations to actually help us. And of course, we provide them with a pathway that is, in terms of career, very interesting for them. So we have international tutors, but we also have national tutors, and it's kind of a career upgrade. You start as a national tutor, then you progress as an ITF tutor. Just to give you an idea, in 2021, this is the funding that we give for the nations to organize courses in their own country, and we help the nations to apply for Olympic solidarity courses. So you make the application with your National Olympic Committee, and then it goes to the IOC, to the International Olympic Committee, and then it comes to the ITF for approval. So normally we try to reverse this and actually work directly with the nations to make the application, and then of course we are inside the loop, and it's much easier actually to make the approval of the courses. Just to give you an idea, the funding for each course for the Olympic Solidarity funded courses is around $10,000 per course. Also a heads up, we have our Worldwide Coaches Conference, so we make these conferences every 2 years. We also have the Tennis Europe conference, and unfortunately, because of COVID-19, we had to stop with these conferences. The last one that we did was actually in Bangkok, that you can see the photo there. All these photos are from the conference in Bangkok in 2019. But we are actually making a worldwide online event next week, actually. So from the 5th to the 7th of November. If you didn't have the opportunity to actually register for this, I would advise you to do so. So you can do it through the online academy. So you register first to the academy, and then you register for this conference that will have a lot of content that is very interesting for sure. On the participation pillar, so this is a very important actually part of the development, which is actually trying to engage more and more players to come in and to connect with the nation. So the biggest participation program that we have is the Junior Tennis Initiative, or the JTI. So this program actually provides the nations with funding, with money to pay to people, but also with material like balls, rackets, and all that kind of stuff that they can do used in their own programs, like school tennis program with clubs, so they can provide this material to the clubs, but they can also use part of the funding to pay to people, to coaches, actually to participate in these programs. These are the countries that are actually in the program as of now. We hope that Norway will also join us in a short period. Another program that we have in participation is the World Tennis Number. This is a rating program similar to other programs that we have in the market, but this is a very global program with a lot of countries. Most of the countries in the world have already signed up and are transitioning to actually have the rating. Most of the countries in Europe already signed up. Norway is actually one of these countries, and we are very excited to see and Norway actually coming up and merging their database with us and actually providing this service to their players. So all of the countries are actually engaged in this, and this is one of the biggest one of the biggest fundings that we have inside the ITF actually to push this program to go forward. In events, we have the National Assistance Program. This was a program that was actually created for the pandemic, as a response to the pandemic, with more than $500,000 US. Actually, that number, $424,000 US, was actually already surpassed, and some funding was added to it. Most of the countries in Europe are actually eligible for this, and this can be used. It's actually mainly for tournaments, so it was a help that we gave to the nation actually for them to return to tennis and actually to re-engage in the competition. So let's say to kickstart the competition after the pandemic years. We also have through Tennis Europe the 14 and under national projects. In 2021, they were only for the tier 1 nations. So these are all the nations that in Europe are from the group 1, or the group that has the biggest priority level for the ITF and for Tennis Europe. And this is a program mainly to do training camps. That in some cases actually were international training camps. For instance, Moldova did an international training camp with Bulgaria using the funding for this program. On the performance side, and as I said, the Grand Slam Development Fund funding normally goes to players directly, and these Grand Slam player grants normally are $25,000 US. So given directly to the players. So this is money that the players use to fund and to help in their competitive programs. These are the players that had the latest grants. The ITF also joins in and uses part of its funding for junior players. So these Grand Slam player grants are for professional players. These are for junior players. We normally use to see which are the eligible players. We use mainly the rankings as a metric to provide, and of course the opinion of the development officer to provide the grants for the players. But the players need to apply through their national association. So this link is also very important for you, I think, to understand that all these programs are accessible through the national association, so through the federations. So that needs to be a good connection with the National Association actually to access this program. So the ITF and Tennis Europe only directly work with the nations. We also have teams. So the touring teams that go to a number of tournaments. So normally 4 to 6 tournaments in a row with an international coach from the ITF. So normally we have several teams that are mainly ITF teams. Normally the 18 and under teams are ITF teams, although the ITF has also smaller 14 and under and 16 and under teams. And then you have the regional teams that are managed by, in this case, by Tennis Europe. So unfortunately, these teams were mostly cancelled for obvious reasons in 2020. But in 2021, we already restarted with some of the teams, and probably, hopefully, in 2022, we will have the teams coming back again in full force. So you can see the international teams that we have from the ITF, and I can tell you that 50% of the players in these teams are from Europe, because, of course, Europe is the most developed region, and most of the eligible players, of course, in terms of ranking, come from Europe. These are the touring teams that we had with Tennis Europe in 2019. So we had 3 teams, 2 14 and under, and 1 16 and under team. all the expenses, of course, of the players are paid by the ITF and Grand Slam Development Fund funding. So they pay nothing. They are selected and they go with the coaches. Normally, we always have a team of 4 boys, 4 girls, and 2 coaches, 1 male and 1 female. This is also something very important. We also want to promote constantly female coaches coming into the to this line of work, and of course we encourage also the nations to give as much as possible the possibility and to try to promote that female coaches actually come into the to these programs and to, of course, the national programs. One of the biggest events that we have with Tennis Europe are the 14 and under development championships, which is basically 2 tournaments back to back that normally are organized every year in Antalya, Turkey, with tier 1 nations. So 11 nations, 44 players, 11 coaches, and simultaneously we also organize a 12 and under training camp for the same nations, but with, of course, the 12 and under players. Normally we try to make a sequence that the players that are in the training camp, hopefully 1 or 2 years later, will be a part of the 14 and under development championships and then national teams. We also use the 14 and under development championships as a selection for our 14 and under team. So normally I'm there and I make the selection based on not only on their rankings but also on the results of this competition, and also, of course, on the level of the players that is observed and discussed with the coaches of the nations. So what does the development officer do? Basically, the development officer, as Aslak mentioned, so basically travels. He or she travels throughout his region, trying to actually connect to the nations, but also to observe locally what's going on with the nations, to visit the facilities, to talk to players, talk to parents, talk to coaches, and actually to participate in conferences, workshops, and all these types of activity. We also promote always, as you will see next in Norway, we always promote a meeting with the National Olympic Committee. So I already mentioned that the connection with the National Olympic Committee is very important to us. And you can see this just in 2019, that was our last normal year, let's say, before the pandemic. We touched directly, or we influenced directly, more than 230 players from 38 different nations, a lot of coaches also. So this is something that actually alters a lot the trajectory in a positive way for the players. So you can see the number of visits that I've made. When I was traveling, of course, in 2020, travel stopped, and we hope we restarted already in 2021, and we hope to go back to the countries. And you can see me there with a nice tie in the Olympic Committee of Norway. And of course, this gives us a chance to connect directly to the nations, because if we didn't have development officers, then we wouldn't have a direct connection, and we would just work remotely from statistics and reports, which is, as you can imagine, not exactly the same thing. This is the kind of information that we gather from the different countries. We look at all these different metrics so we can have a chance to evaluate what's going on in the country, and actually then promote talks and meetings with the officials of the federation, with the CEOs, with the technical directors, with the Davis Cup captains, so we can discuss what we think about these metrics. And of course, every single country has their own challenges. So Norway at this moment is in a very, I would say, important point that has happened with other nations before, but with some nations it never happens, which is the possibility of having a very high level player, a top 10 player, that changes everything. So we work in all the countries in participation for many years. I worked with the Portuguese Tennis Federation for 25 years in different areas. I was actually in almost all the areas of the Portuguese Tennis Federation. I started in the National Training Center. I was a coach in the Davis Cup team, but then I worked as the development director in coaches education and in participation. I can tell you, we can work in participation as much as we want. We can do a lot of programs, but if we have a top-level player, then everything changes in a very positive way. Everybody talks about tennis in the country, and we have access to different sponsorship, not just from private institutions, but also from government institutions. So everything changes. This is like a wave, and the federations and actually all the tennis community needs to learn how to surf, let's say, this wave of having a player like this. So bear in mind that this is a global challenge. It's not just a challenge of your federation. This is a challenge of every single one of you that actually works in tennis, not just coaches, but also, of course, players and parents are influenced by all this. Norway has some particular challenges, so facilities are, of course, a big challenge. I can tell you that Norway, when compared to other countries in Europe, has the number of facilities are, of course, under the level that we consider to be acceptable for a developing nation. So we know that it's very difficult, and unfortunately, facilities are the single most expensive item on all these programs. So it's very expensive to build a facility. It's impossible for most of the federations, of course, except the Grand Slam nations, to build their own facilities with their own funding, but they need government funding. And of course, they can ask help with the ITF, but of course, the funds are limited for this. But also the number of coaches is very reduced. So we need more coaches in Norway for sure. This is something that we know. We also need more gender balance, and this is not just something of being politically correct and try to look for gender equality in every single place. It's actually very positive to have more women working alongside with men, because they bring in a completely different look on the different programs. So it's quite engaging to have more women, and also it gives the possibility for female players actually to connect on a different level with their coaches. This is why we in ITF and in Tennis Europe, in every single team, in every single event, we also try to reach for the 50-50 that we hope that we should have in every single of our programs. Just to give you an idea, Norway sits at this point in the 10% level of female coaches, which is quite low. But it's not abnormal. It's what we find in most countries. But I can tell you that the countries that are more developed in this have very close to 50-50 gender balance in their coaching community. So another challenge, and it's challenge especially important for a smaller nation, a nation like Norway with a little bit more than 5 million people, participation is always very important. So it's the base of the pyramid. We need as much new players as possible, especially younger players. These are the ones that will have the possibility of being the future top-level players. So we want players coming in at an early age, at 5-6 years old, as much as possible, to give us a wider base, the biggest wider base as possible. This is what we want, and it's very difficult to do in a small nation because the nation simply doesn't have the population to give us the biggest base as possible, unfortunately. And so this is a big advantage, of course, that larger nations have. For instance, if you look at the US, they have 20 million players, tennis players. So it's with a base like that, it's very easy to, let's say, to produce players just by probability. They will always produce players. So it's very difficult for nations like Norway actually to produce a player like the level that you see in Casper Ruud. But this is why I say this is just a huge opportunity that you have actually to drive participation, because the presence of a player of this level actually engages all the tennis community. So as a conclusion to this presentation, and I'm talking too much already, I would say as a recommendation for all the coaches is actually to support your federation. Sometimes it's difficult, the relationship between the federations in all countries is difficult with coaches, difficult with players, but it's very important to have a good relationship and actually to support the federation to do their own work, because it's very difficult for all the federations. The funding is always limited, it's never enough for everything. So we need this support, and remember, you can only access the International Tennis Federation programs and the Grand Slam development programs through your federation. Also, as an advice, participate in these programs. In my career, as I said, I worked with the Portuguese Tennis Federation. I engaged Tennis Europe, ITF. We've organized a lot of events, not just tournaments, but also coaches education events like conferences. Through many years, I started participating in the ITF programs as an expert and then as a tutor in the courses. So this is very important. Always provide feedback, not just criticism. Feedback is always important. It's important for the National Association, for their programs. It's always useful. Try to engage your own programs, this feedback system with the parents. Try to engage also the parents to be aware of the programs. The ITF Online Academy provides an interesting platform for the parents to learn a lot about the programs of the International Federation, but also of the National Association. And so this is very important to promote the education of parents, but also of coaches. As I said, the number of coaches in Norway is quite small, so we need more coaches. We need more coaches doing the courses and working with the players in the country. So this is very important. Education is always paramount for all this. And remember, promote tennis always. Sometimes we think we do this, but sometimes we have a negative attitude, and we all know coaches that are constantly, nagging about other coaches, nagging about parents, criticizing constantly the programs of the National Association. Unless they are hired by the National Association. So I've seen this happen a lot of time. One of the coaches that always criticizes the National Association and then gets hired to work with the National Federation, and then it changes because it's completely different. I myself went through that process, and it's quite a humbling process actually to be outside and criticizing. Then when you go inside, you see how difficult it is actually to take these programs with you forward. So this would be my final advice. So thank you very much for listening. I hope that this presentation was useful to you. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Vitor. Very happy if you can share your presentation.
Yes.
We will put this out on the big